Right now, you are wearing something. You put it on this morning without thinking. Maybe you chose it for the weather. Maybe for how it looks. Maybe you just grabbed whatever was closest. But you did not once stop to ask yourself why you were wearing anything at all. That question has a real answer, and it is not the one you were taught. You were probably told that early humans started wearing clothes to stay warm. That makes sense. It sounds obvious. Cold climate, animal skin, problem solved. But when researchers began asking exactly when and why clothing appeared, the evidence told a completely different story, a stranger story, one that says more about who you are as a person than about what temperature it was outside. Because the real reason humans started wearing clothes had almost nothing to do with cold. Start with the timeline. For most of human history, your ancestors walked the earth with no clothes at all. Homo sapiens appeared roughly 300,000 years ago, the oldest physical evidence of clothing. Needles made of bone, dyed fibers, shells used as toggles. Dates back only about 120,000 to 75,000 years. That means your species existed, fully human, for at least 150,000 years before anyone made a deliberate effort to cover themselves. That is not a species scrambling to survive the cold. And when researchers looked at where the oldest clothing evidence was found, something immediately stood out. It was not in the coldest regions of the prehistoric world. It was in Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa, a place that was then, as it is now, extremely warm. That single fact should stop you cold. In 2010, anthropologist Ian Gilligan published a landmark study in the Journal of World Prehistory, arguing that clothing emerged in two distinct phases with two completely different motivations. The first was what he called simple clothing, basic wrapping and covering, appearing in warm climates, long before cold was ever a factor. The second, much later, was complex, tailored clothing, the kind sewn tight against the body to trap heat, which appeared when humans began migrating into genuinely cold environments. Cold explained the second phase. But something else entirely explained the first. So what explained the first? To understand that, you need to understand something about the animal you are, because you are, in a biological sense, a deeply unusual primate. Every other great ape, the chimpanzee, the gorilla, the orangutan, is covered in dense body hair. You are not. At some point in your evolutionary history, your ancestors lost most of their body hair. The exact timing is debated, but genetic and fossil evidence suggests it happened somewhere between 1.2 million and 3 million years ago. Long before clothing, long before tools, long before fire. Why did this happen? The leading theory, supported by researcher Nina Jablonski at Penn State, is that losing body hair allowed your ancestors to cool more efficiently. As early humans began running long distances to hunt on the open savanna, dense fur became a liability. Sweating through bare skin kept the brain from overheating. Losing the hair was an adaptation for endurance. But losing the hair created a new problem. Bare skin is exposed skin. And exposed skin, especially in the parts of your body you now automatically cover, is vulnerable in specific ways that go far beyond temperature. Here is what the evidence shows. The timing of when humans began covering themselves aligns remarkably well, not with temperature drops in the climate record, but with something far more intimate: parasites. In 2011, geneticist Mark Pagel and researcher Walter Bodmer published research suggesting that clothing originated as a response to ectoparasites, lice in particular. Your ancestors lost their body hair, which disrupted the habitat of the body louse. Body lice, unlike head lice, require clothing fibers to lay their eggs. Genetic analysis of louse DNA has allowed researchers to date when body lice diverged from head lice. Essentially, the moment humans began wearing enough clothing consistently enough for a new louse species to evolve. That date? Roughly 72,000 years ago. Right in the window of the earliest physical clothing evidence. Think about what that means. The louse, one of the most irritating parasites you can imagine, accidentally recorded the origin of human clothing in its own DNA. Because a parasite can only evolve to live in clothing if clothing existed long enough for evolution to happen. And evolution takes thousands of generations. Your ancestors did not start wearing clothes because they were cold. They started because bare, sweating, running skin attracted parasites. And something had to be done about that. But there is another layer to this story, and it may be the most interesting one. Because clothing did not just solve a biological problem, it solved a social one. And the social function may have locked clothing into human culture permanently. Researcher Gilligan argues that once early humans began covering parts of their bodies, something profound happened to the way their social world was organized. Covered skin became private skin. And private skin created an entirely new category of human experience: modesty, intimacy, exclusion, and display. Think about what clothing does in every single human society ever studied. Every one of them uses clothing or its deliberate absence to signal status, to mark who belongs to which group, to indicate who is available, who is powerful, who is dangerous, who is sacred. Anthropologist Ruth Barnes, studying textile traditions across cultures, found that in virtually every known society, what you wear, or what you do not wear, communicates more about your social identity than almost any other physical marker. Clothing became language before writing existed, and once it became language, it could not be abandoned, even if the temperature rose, even if the parasites went away. Because now clothing carried meaning. It carried identity. It told people who you were without you ever opening your mouth. That function never went away. It just got more elaborate. Look at the oldest decorative evidence. The Blombos Cave in South Africa, dated to roughly 75,000 to 100,000 years ago, contains shells with holes deliberately pierced through them, almost certainly worn as beads or pendants on the body or on clothing. Ochre, a red pigment, was being ground and applied to surfaces at the same site. These are not survival tools. These are communication tools. These are signals sent from one human to other humans about who this person is. You do the exact same thing every morning when you get dressed. The evolutionary psychologist Geoffrey Miller argues that much of human ornamentation, jewelry, clothing, tattoos, body modification, functions as what he calls a fitness signal. It tells potential mates, rivals, and allies something about your genetic quality, your social alliances, your resources, your creativity. The peacock has its feathers. You have your wardrobe. But there is something even deeper running underneath all of this, something that clothing changed permanently about the human mind itself. Psychologists studying shame and vulnerability have found that the experience of being unclothed in social situations triggers a distinct and powerful fear response in virtually every human on Earth, regardless of culture. Researchers have connected this to what they call the social evaluation threat, the deeply wired human fear of being judged, exposed, found lacking by the group. Clothing, over tens of thousands of years, did not just cover the body. It became part of how humans think about the self. The clothed self and the naked self became psychologically distinct, and this distinction wired itself into how human beings experience shame, identity, vulnerability, and belonging. You feel it every time you are underdressed at a formal occasion. You feel it every time you put on something that makes you feel powerful. You feel it every time you choose not to wear something because of what it would say about you. That is not vanity. That is 75,000 years of evolutionary and cultural programming running inside your brain every single morning. So tomorrow, when you open your closet, you are not just choosing what to wear. You are doing exactly what your ancestors did on the warm African savanna 75,000 years ago, sending a signal, marking your identity, and telling the world something about who you are. Before you say a single word, the clothing changed. The signal never did.